Good morning, everybody. It is 10 o'clock. Welcome to this meeting of the Eastern Area Planning Committee, which is one of 3 area-based planning committees of Dorset Council. Our area of remit covers the previous Purbeck District Council and most of the East Dorset District Council areas. For the benefit of the public, I'm Councillor Tony Coombs and I'm Chairman of this area committee. If I can introduce the officers that are supporting us today. We have Kim Cowell, Principal Planning Officer, Katie Lomax, Planning Case Officer, James Brightman, Planning Case Officer, Liz Adams, Planning Case Officer, Chelsea Goddard will be reading out the public representations. We have Claire Marshall from Highways covering the Eastern area, Colin Graham from Highways covering the Purbeck area, Lara Autry is our solicitor, and David Northover is our committee support officer. I would also like to thank the officers behind the scenes who are making today's virtual meeting possible. We couldn't do without you guys, thank you. So, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the council has had to put in place measures to enable the council's decision-making processes to continue whilst keeping safe members of the public, councillors and council staff in accordance with the government's guidance on social distancing, by applying new regulations for holding committee meetings from remote locations. This meeting is being live streamed to the public and a copy of the recording of the meeting will be available on the website after the meeting. Public participation will take the form of written statements as opposed to public speaking to the committee. We will be following the agenda as set out in your pack. So first of all, please, are there any apologies for absence?
Chairman, apologies for absence received from Councillor Robinson.
Okay, we also have received apologies from Bill Trite.
Thank you.
Okay, so just to confirm that everyone is here, can you just respond in the usual manner when I do the roll call? Shane Bartlett, Vice Chairman.
Present, Madam Chairman.
Alex Brenton.
Present, Madam Chairman.
Robin Cook.
Present, Madam Chairman.
Mike Dyer.
Present, Madam Chairman.
Barry Gorringe.
Present, Madam Chairman.
Brian Heatley.
Good morning, I'm here, Madam
Good
Chairman.
morning. David Morgan.
Present, Madam Chairman.
David Took.
Present, Madam Chairman.
And John Worth.
Present, Madam Chairman.
Good morning to all of you. So moving on with the agenda, do we have any declarations of pecuniary or other conflict of interest, bias or predetermination by members of the committee? I'll take that as a no. If anything comes up during the meeting, please bring it to my attention as and when you become aware of it. Item 3 on the agenda are the minutes of the last meeting held on the 28th of October. Are members happy for me to approve them as a true record and sign them as soon as I'm able to access offices physically?
Happy, Madam Chairman.
Agreed.
Happy.
Thank you. Any dissent? Thank you all very much. I hope the rest of the meeting is this smooth. So moving on to public participation, members of the public have been invited to submit written representations which are limited to 450 words. Members of Dorset Council who are not members of the committee and who wish to address the committee will be allowed to speak to the committee. All requests have to have been registered with Democratic Services by 8:30 AM on Monday the 30th of November. Are there any representations from the public that do not relate to matters on the agenda today?
None received, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the schedule of planning applications, we have 3 applications on the agenda before us today. Have there been any requests for deferrals or withdrawals, please?
Kim Cowell here, Chairman. Yes, we have a request to defer item 5C on page 57. That's the change of use and conversion of 4 existing agricultural buildings to form 9 dwelling houses, works and alterations to other outbuildings and associated landscaping and demolition of redundant buildings at Grange Farm, Coal Hill, Wimborne, Dorset. Third-party representations received since the agenda went to print have presented information about the alignment of an access track, which may have implications for the lawfulness of the access on which the proposal relies. This information requires further investigation so that the officer report may be amended to fully inform members. And it's requested that that application be deferred and brought back to committee at a later date. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy with that. We do need to make sure that everything we do has a sound background to it. Okay, so we are down to 2 applications. So all the background information relating to the applications before us today have been available for inspection by members prior to the meeting. That covers consultations, objections, representations, as well as the East Dorset and Purbeck local plans and the council's related policies. For each application, I will invite the case officer to introduce the item. Members of the public, planning agent, applicants, town and parish councils have all been invited to make written submissions, and these will be read out by Chelsea Gollage, who I need to say has not been involved with the merits of any of the applications, but only in providing technical support. These will be read out in the following order: public against the application, public in support, the applicant or agent, the town or parish council, and then the local member. Following the public participation section on every item, I will ask officers if there are any salient points that they wish to clarify. I will then ask members if there are any questions or comments to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to comment. In order to run the meeting efficiently, may I request that members of the committee direct any remarks and questions through myself as chair, and I'll invite members to speak in turn. Requests to speak will need to be made via the chat facility, and please keep all other comments outside of that. Please also keep your microphones on mute when you're not speaking to maintain audio quality. And at the end of the debate, for transparency, I will take the vote by roll call, and the vote will be recorded in the minutes if 3 or more members make the necessary request. I will also ask members to confirm that they have heard the entire presentation and debate before they cast their vote. So we'll now move on to the first of the applications this morning, and there may be a short gap whilst the presentations are loaded. So our first application is 5A, application 6/2020/0334, 73 West Street, Bere Regis, to demolish workshop, sever plot and erect dwelling at 73 High Street, which is on pages 15 to 44 of your agenda pack. So Liz Adams is going to be presenting this one. Liz, are you ready to go?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Floor is
Good morning,
yours.
members. Thank you. Good morning, members. My name is Liz Adams and I am presenting this application for you this morning. This is for a new dwelling to replace an outbuilding, and it comes before you because of concerns raised by ward members and the parish council, in particular in relation to the impact on the conservation area and the future amenity of residents and neighbours. The site is located within Bere Regis in the Purbeck area. This extract is taken from the neighbourhood plan, and the star here is the application site. Bere Regis is a sustainable location for new dwellings. The settlement benefits from facilities including a post office, a shop, doctors and dentist, and Bere Regis Primary School. The Bere Regis neighbourhood plan allocates land for residential development under policy BR7, and this is shown in pink here. I've included this because the land includes a 0.1 hectare site, which is on Tower Hill, this same access that is intended to serve the new property. This land allocation does not preclude other windfall residential development, and there is of course a national presumption in favour of sustainable development. On this plan, I've shown the settlement boundary here with the dotted line, and there's the areas again allocated for housing development. Now, 6 residents and the parish council have raised objections to the proposed erection of one new dwelling at the rear of 73 West Street, and this is on the basis that the proposed additional dwelling will lead to traffic problems in combination with future housing development, the impact on living conditions of neighbouring residents, the impact on the character of the area and the conservation area within which the site falls, and drainage issues. So we'll examine these. The existing dwelling at number 73 forms part of a terrace of housing that fronts onto West Street, but the rear garden slopes up about 3 metres to Tower Hill, which you see here, and this is where there's an existing shed outbuilding. It's proposed to replace this with a 2-storey dwelling with a single-storey appearance, and this is going to be achieved by creating an underground lower floor. So this is the street scene as proposed. The site lies within West Street character area, which is identified by the Bere Regis Townscape Character Appraisal. And in this area, there is an identified opportunity for infill development, provided this preserves or enhances the character of the area. Development to the rear of number 74 and 75 has set a precedent for development south of Tower Lane, and this proposal would represent a continuation of the existing residential linear arrangement. It's proposed that the site is divided so that number 73 retains a terraced garden. The proposed dwelling would be modest in size and provides a 1-bedroom property at ground floor level with living space below. Now, whilst the underground element would stretch across the width of the site, you can see from here to here, this would be below the level of the highway, and so it would not be evident within the street scene. 1 parking space is proposed to serve the new property, and this is an existing parking space to be retained, slightly modified. And it's also proposed, as far as possible, to retain the boundary hedging. Now, although modest, the floor area of 66 square metres is comfortably above the 58 square metres identified by the nationally described space standards for a 1-bedroom dwelling. The property will offer a bedroom and a shower room, together with an open living room, a kitchen area, a separate toilet and a utility space. And there's a study office here to the south, served by a sun tube. Built storage space is also provided, and this is in accordance with national space guidance. It's noted that in the Purbeck area, the Strategic Housing Market Assessment identified a greater need for smaller properties than for larger ones. The proposal represents an efficient use of land to provide a modest dwelling. So this is the existing workshop building. It's made from corrugated metal, as you've seen in the photos I've already shown you. It's quite large, obviously, for the domestic location, but it's got a low pitched roof. I need to say at this point that there is, unfortunately, at paragraph 1610 of the officer report, there's an error because it suggests that the proposed ridge height would increase the height of the building by 0.5 above what's already there, but actually it wouldn't increase at all. The current building is 4.2 metres high and the proposed building is 4.2 metres high, as we'll see in a minute, so I apologise for that error. Now, there was a previous application on this site for a new dwelling, and that was refused earlier this year. The proposal sought to achieve a 2-storey form above ground, and it would have raised the ridge height of the building to almost 6 metres, adding considerably to the bulk of the existing property with an extension, and it would have introduced an incongruous design that failed to relate appropriately to the adjoining dwellings. You can see here in this side profile that it looked more like a 2-storey house at the back, coming down to a single storey at the front, but it was considered that there were 3 reasons for refusal, and these are set out in your officer report. The proposal was considered to harm the character of the area, to harm heritage assets, and to harm neighbouring amenity. We've got overlooking taking place here and into the neighbouring property too. So the proposed dwelling has sensitively responded to the previous reasons for refusal. The proportions of the replacement building would now follow those of the existing. As you can see, there's no windows proposed in the rear elevation. And this is as would be seen from the rear of number 73, the parent property, It's equivalent to the existing relationship with a workshop, only now there's the insertion of a boundary fence to demarcate the two gardens. Similar fencing has been used on the site to the east, where the garden's also been subdivided. The dotted line, which you see here, is the height of the buildings on West Street. A gate and hedging gate would be retained, so it would in fact maintain the existing arrangement in visual terms. There will be minimal visual impact in terms of the size of the property and the arrangement of the site from the street scene. The door design has been amended to a sort of plank door, and that was at the request of the conservation officer, so it's more in keeping with the original function of the existing outbuilding. The design of the visible elements of the scheme are sympathetic to the location and not out of character with the area. The property is to be achieved by the excavation of the hillside, and this would create a lower ground floor and an outdoor courtyard. Now, some may have noticed reference to the contiguous wall piles. I think I've got a picture of those as the proposed method of construction. And these are suited, obviously this is just an example, but these are suited to constrained sites, and apparently they're often used in urban areas as they avoid encroachment into adjoining properties and are associated with relatively low levels of noise and vibration. As it was noted in the officer report, advice has been sought from the council's engineers and the building control team, and reassurance has been provided that there are no known ground stability issues in the area and construction should therefore be feasible. And in these circumstances, it's not considered reasonable to require further information prior to the determination of the application. Nevertheless, due to the hillside location, a pre-commencement condition, that's number 3, is proposed to secure a site investigation report into the ground conditions and an excavation plan, including monitoring by a competent person. And this condition has been agreed by the applicant and will be supplemented by the requirements of the building control regulations and the Party Wall Act. The site doesn't lie within an area of flood risk, but the building will obviously alter the natural rate of the surface water runoff. So it's judged that pre-commencement condition 5 to secure a surface water drainage strategy is relevant and necessary. Also, due to the constrained nature of the site, it's considered necessary in this instance to secure a construction management plan, and that's suggested as condition number 4. All these pre-commencement conditions have been agreed by the applicant and will supplement the requirements of the other regulations, as already said, to ensure that the development will take place in a way that minimises disturbance in the locality and doesn't increase the risk of flooding. Turning to heritage assets. As we've seen, the dwelling has been designed to utilise land level changes in order to minimise the visual impact of the build and to achieve an acceptable design in the area, which is very constrained by heritage assets. So here you see that the site lies within the Bere Regis conservation area, which covers the older parts of the village. Number 73 itself is a non-designated heritage asset set between 2 Grade 2 listed buildings, and these all contribute to the setting of the conservation area. Tower Lane is one of the network of small lanes within the conservation area which retain its rural character as a result of the banks and the hedging and soft landscaping and their relationship with the open countryside. So your officers have considered the application in the light of our statutory duty to pay special attention to the desirability of preserving or enhancing the character and the appearance of the conservation area, and against the provisions of the National Planning Policy Framework, which seek protection of heritage assets, together, of course, with Local Plan Policy LLH. The innovative nature of the proposal is considered to limit its impact on the level of harm, on the conservation area, and the setting of the listed building to the level of less than substantial harm. And this you'll be aware of is the least level of harm on the sort of spectrum within the National Planning Policy Framework. And this is because the visual sense of space between the structures will be retained, and so will the workshop character of the building. So the limited impact is considered to be outweighed in this case by the public benefits of providing an additional dwelling to meet local housing needs. Here's some photos to provide you with context. Here we see the view east from Butt Lane towards the existing workshop building. This again is looking up Tower Hill towards the site. So the form would remain pretty much as it is now, with slightly different obviously fenestration. And then we have this is the view down towards Butt Lane, with these infill houses that have already been built and the new proposed site there. This is moving from east to west along. So here we have the site with the existing parking area, which will be re-provided once the new development is installed. Then we have the retained parking space for number 74, which is the other side of the building here. Oh no, sorry, I'm going away here. And here we have the parking area in front of the Meadowview barn. These are all views from Meadowview barn, looking towards the application site. So this same bulk will be evident. We've already got this wall which is to be retained, and the hedge is also proposed to be retained. This is the rear of number 73, the parent property, with the window that looks out already over the workshop. The garden for the new plot will be lower, so no overlooking will occur. The existing, sorry, in here. So this is the wall that is just here between number 72 and 73, and the submerged lower ground floor will be not evident because you've got this wall, and again the garden will be lower, but there is proposed a 1.8 metre high section of fencing is also proposed to stop overlooking from number 72 down into the new garden. This is the Meadowview barn, and it's really important to say that these are not windows, though they look like them. They are in fact glazed elements over the brick wall, and they're intended purely as an aesthetic feature. So the only overlooking from Meadowview barn is from the views that we looked at just now from the ground floor. Here we see the relationship between the existing dwelling and the proposed. The main difference for the occupiers will be the introduction of a 1.8 metre high fence. This is necessary for safety and to prevent overlooking of the new dwelling. The proposed rear courtyard to serve the property is small, but it's considered sufficient to provide a sitting out area, and it relates well to the new living area through large glazed doors. As explained in the officer report, the site has easy access to public rights of way and open countryside, so the size of the amenity space is not considered to result in harm to the amenity of future occupiers so as to justify refusal. Officers did raise concerns during the application about light levels, and therefore the applicants have provided a solar study. This study shows that adequate daylight will be afforded to the property all year round for habitable purposes, and direct sunlight will be provided for all but 6 to 8 weeks of the year. So in the depths of winter, you wouldn't get direct sunlight, but that is the case for any north-facing window or other property. For instance, they looked at the similar relationship with the front, I think, of the northern aspect of the West Street properties, and again you wouldn't get direct sunlight into those rooms, but there's still sufficient daylight as to render them habitable. This is a close-up. So this talks about how the fence could be reduced, and that would increase daylight entry, but this is not considered necessary to require that in order to create acceptable daylight entry into the south-facing site. Moving on to parking, concerns have been raised about the impact on parking in the vicinity. The proposal will retain the existing parking space belonging to 73, but that will be for the new property. So this will displace one parking space onto the street. I provided here the Google Street View image of West Street looking east. The street is 8 metres wide, and it can accommodate on-street parking on both sides of the highway. The existing parking space belonging to number 73 is not subject to any planning condition, and on-street parking is available in front of the dwelling, The site is in a sustainable location, which is served by buses, and therefore it's not considered reasonable to refuse permission on the basis of insufficient parking, although it's below that which would usually be suggested by the guidance. The occupants of number 73 have the right to utilise a rear access belonging to 72 through to Butts Lane, so they would be able to continue to wheel their bins onto the highway for collection. In summary, the proposal is found to accord with national and local planning policies subject to conditions. So in addition to those already mentioned, these are proposed to secure landscaping details, materials, details of the fenestration, the provision of the parking space and the removal of permitted development rights for additional extensions in the future. This is a new one-bedroom dwelling proposed in a sustainable location. It's carefully designed to minimise the impacts on character and appearance of the area, where less than substantial harm to heritage assets is outweighed by the public benefit of additional housing provision. And for all these reasons, your officer recommendation is one of approval, subject to those conditions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Liz. We do have Colin Graham with us this morning. Colin is from Highways. Is there anything that you would like to add to the presentation now, or would you rather respond to member questions?
The only thing I would add at this stage is that it's my understanding that the curtilage, the rear garden, the rear part of the property could be severed, and because the parking isn't conditioned. And if it was severed, it could then be sold off for application later on. So it's just I might be incorrect on that, but perhaps the planning officer can confirm on that. Thank you.
Liz, would you like to respond to that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Colin is correct that there is no condition requiring retention of the parking space for number 73. Thank you.
Chairman, your microphone.
Sorry, I've just realised. Sorry, my headphones aren't working properly this morning. I was on mute. So move on now to the public objections. Chelsea College, do we have any public representations for this application, please?
Yes, we've received one, Madam Chairman.
Would you like to take us through it, please?
Yeah, the first one is from Jackie Ahern. We would like to object to this application for the following reasons. It is not included in the Bere Regis neighbourhood plan. The Bere Regis neighbourhood plan was extensively consulted on in 2019 and a village referendum was held. The plan was approved, and we believe that in June 2019, Dorset County Council released a press release congratulating Bere Regis on its neighbourhood plan. The plan allows for 105 new houses to be built in Bere Regis, the location for these being set out in the plan. The neighbourhood plan allows for 2-3 houses to be built a little bit further up Tower Hill. So if they go ahead and this application is granted, there could be a significant increase in traffic in this conservation area. The revised plans for 73 West Street now put the bulk of the proposed development underground, but there is no reference to any structural engineering survey to indicate that this is safe. Is there any chance of causing subsidence to adjacent properties and gardens? Is there a risk to local water supplies and drainage? Is there a risk of land slippage? We do, however, note that any grant of planning permission will be subject to ground surveys, etc. The application makes no reference to the impact on our property, Woodbury Cottage, 74 West Street, Bere Regis. Woodbury Cottage has access to Tower Hill via the back of the property, where there is 2 off-road parking spaces, one of them directly adjacent to the proposed new dwelling. Meadowview Barn has 1 off-road parking space. It is difficult to imagine how the proposed dwelling can be constructed without intrusion onto land belonging to Woodbury Cottage. Note, one of our off-road parking spaces is directly adjacent to the existing black workshop. The proposed new dwelling has 1 double bedroom and an office study 2nd bedroom. However, it only allows for 1 parking space. It is not unreasonable to assume that any tenants or owners will have more than 1 vehicle.
Where will they park? Bere Regis already has a known traffic and parking problem. Vehicles already park on the corner of Tower Hill and Butt Lane, causing larger vehicles to mount the curb and damage the bank. That's all the comments. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much. Officers, are there any comments you wish to make on the public representation?
Not at this stage, thank you.
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much. We'll now move on to member debate. My first speaker is Shane Bartlett.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Could I just ask for some confirmations from the officers about a couple of things? In the report on flood risk and drainage at 16.34, there it talks about the suitable drainage system in Sudswell Soakaway, that if the application is approved, then they would enter into a condition, a planning condition, in order to satisfy the need for that potential flooding and to deal with that surface water drainage. And also at 16.39, in terms of the ground stability, the council's engineer again has got a confirmation from the agent that any agreement to a pre-commencement condition on decision requiring full details of ground conditions and any likely instability in the method of piling to be used to be agreed by the council before any works start on site. The condition was also request full drainage details, as I've already said. So is this a normal process? We're not in a position that we could actually demand that we have these details first. The normal course of action would be that these would come in at a later date once the application is approved. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair, this is Liz Adams. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, in this instance, there aren't any concerns about ground instability, and the site is located in an area with no known flood risk. So as there's considered to be low risk, and as there's considered to be methods that can be used to overcome drainage issues, either via soakaway or through an alternative drainage system, and because there's ways that it's considered different options of how the development can be constructed, at this stage, prior to determination, it's considered that all those details can be satisfactorily dealt with if members are minded to grant permission through the conditions as proposed.
Okay, can I come back, Madam Chairman? So that's pertaining to this particular individual plan application, but is this the norm, or are there on planning applications, can it be insisted upon a full ground geological and geographical survey is done on the site prior to it coming to a committee to determine a decision on it?
Through you, Chair. Liz Adams, it would only be reasonable for us to require additional details if there was concern that there was a possibility it couldn't be achieved. So in this instance, it would be unreasonable to refuse, say, on the basis that we don't have those details, because there's no suggestion that the proposal can't be achieved. If there was a different scenario and we had issues with ground surface water flooding, then we would be requiring those details up front to satisfy ourselves that it could be achieved. But as I say, there isn't that risk on this site. Now, I appreciate that this site involves a lot of excavation that isn't as usual, isn't the usual scenario, but those details, how that is undertaken is outside of the planning system in terms of it's covered by building control regulations, it's covered by the Party Wall Act, and our jurisdiction is limited to ensuring that that surface water drainage doesn't cause surface water flooding, and that that the works don't result in ground instability that we should have been able to identify before it happened. And in this case, we don't consider that there's likelihood of ground instability, and therefore we're happy that we can just get those that final confirmation post decision. I hope that helps.
Madam Chair, can I come back? Okay, yeah. While I appreciate in terms of the planning material considerations and not being an expert in the field, obviously, to excavate 200 metre cube of soil to accommodate this in such close proximity to other properties does give me cause for concern. But as you say, that's going to be dealt with by engineers and professional people that are going to deal with that. But it does give me a cause for concern sat in a planning committee that, as you say, this is unusual in terms of a development in that such an amount of soil has to be excavated to accommodate the proposed intention of creating the dwelling. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on to my next speaker now, and that's John Worth.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, it's probably outside of the remit of the planning committee, and I understand that it might be a building control matter, but I have some reservations when it comes to putting in piling. I know it was mentioned in the officer's report that this is piling that can, is low impact. However, any piling does create vibration and that sort of thing. I'm just concerned about piling activity in close proximity to other properties causing shock waves through the ground that could damage adjacent properties. As I say, that might be outside of our remit and it might be more building control, but I just feel that I wanted to highlight that might be an issue. Thank you.
Okay, Liz, do we know if they are going to be power driven or core drilled?
The contiguous piling involves, I think there's two options, aren't there? I made a note, this is not my speciality. They cast concrete piles. They either use a rotary board system, apparently, or a continuous flight auger technique. So it's not the sort of traditional piling that you might anticipate. I'm sorry that this, again, because we're sort of straying into areas that are covered by the building control regulations. It means that as an officer, I have to the only advice I can provide is that the proposed form of piling is one that is anticipated to be less intrusive than others might be, and that this is the form of piling that has been used very effectively in very constrained locations, particularly in London, where they're doing a lot of work in very tight spaces. So although this is an unusual suggestion in Dorset, it's not an unusual form of development in the country as a whole, and it is, as we say, it is a matter that will be covered by several areas of legislation which are intended to minimise the negative impacts for surrounding development. And from a planning perspective, the main point is that there are ways of building it, and how it is ultimately built will be up to the developer under the legislation covered by building control. I hope that answers that question.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on now to our next speaker, and that's Alex Brenton.
Thank you, Chair. I understand a bit about building in very confined spaces from sort of a family member who used to do this sort of thing in London, and I can see that it is feasible. But this is a very constrained space which is not used to having big machinery doing these sort of innovative projects. You have a very narrow lane behind. The access to all this is very narrow. You are going to have big heavy machinery coming through. There's going to be an amazing amount of disruption to the residents of the Tower Hill, West Street, Butts Lane area to generate one very small property, which is not, I would say not desperately needed, because housing is needed, but I cannot see for whom this would suit. The desire in Bere Regis is for small properties for young families, start-up families, or for older people who want to downsize to something more comfortable that doesn't involve lots of steps. This property is going to be small, but it's hardly designed for someone who wants to downsize to a more comfortable, more manageable property. It just seems a totally inappropriate property for that area, let alone the hassle and inconvenience to the residents in the area. And so I'm not convinced that it is I can see it's a sensible option if you were in a big city, but it just seems inappropriate for such a village site. And when you look at number 73, they are sort of cutting off their nose to spite their face. They're actually going to spoil the amenity of number 73. So I am very concerned about this one, put it that way. I can't see that it fits the criteria in the parish plan. There are other sites coming forwards. The site almost opposite, well, a bit further along in Tower Hill, which is designated as possible building site, has not been taken up because of the height differences, because of the actual practicalities. So it feels to me this is very odd. I am concerned. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. My next speaker is Brian Heatley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I see this as a very ingenious and creative response to the previous reasons for refusal of the earlier application. Building in this way, making a large excavation, is actually very common in London. There are ways of doing it. People are building vast basements all the time. And I can't believe that it's not possible to solve the problems. Okay, if there'd been obvious problems with water or whatever to begin with, then that would be reasons for a lot more caution. But I'm sure it's possible to do so, and I think it ill behoves us to refuse something just because it's unusual or a bit difficult or creative in engineering terms. From the point of view of the area as a whole, as it happens, I know that little bit of Bere Regis rather well because my wife's mother used to live there some years ago, and so I've got a good appreciation of the street scene and what it feels like and that kind of thing. It does seem to me that there's a real effort has been made to do something that is appropriate for that area, and it's not as if what is there at the moment is something of great merit. It seems to me this will be an improvement from the point of view of what that area looks like. So on the whole, and I'll listen to other things that people say, I think we should be accepting this one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to the next speaker, and that's David Took.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. What I'd like to do is just explore a little bit further into the weight that is given to the neighbourhood plan. Now, I'd hope that neighbourhood plans, especially fairly recent ones, which this is, would carry great weight. And this is the development policy BR7 identifies 5 allocated sites for development, of which this is not one. Now, I recognise that the officers are saying, and I assume based on NPPF Paris 68, that this is a windfall site, and we can give weight to the benefits of using it. But it also says to work with developers to encourage subdivision of large sites, where this could help to speed up the delivery of homes. I would question whether this is a large site, and I would just like to explore a little bit with the officers as to the balance between the neighbourhood plan identifying development sites and the opportunity to subdivide a large site to provide windfall development, which is what they seem to be relying on here. I'd just like to hear a little bit more about their reasons for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Liz or Kim, do you want to respond to those comments, please?
Thank you, Chair. Liz Adams here. Apparently I've got bad network quality, so I apologise if you can't hear me very well. As I said at the beginning, there is allocated land within the Bere Regis settlement for new dwellings, and that is intended to assist our housing land supply into the coming years. But we still seek sustainable development, and this is in a settlement location where it meets that sort of definition of a sustainable location. And in those circumstances, the question isn't, it's not why have we got this additional dwelling in addition to what we've already allocated. Rather, it's would an additional dwelling in this location meet all the other policies. So what I'm trying to say is, sorry, a bit clumsily, is that the allocation policy is a positive pro-development policy. We're going to allow and encourage development in these places, but that pro-development policy doesn't mean that we're not going to allow development in any other location. So other locations can be considered, but each one is on its merits. I hope that helps.
That's pretty much what I understood. I'm just querying. NPPF para 68 talks about subdividing large sites. Would the back garden of 73 West Street be classed as a large site? It doesn't seem that big to me. So where's the balance that you're trying to find, rather than simply let's build?
Through you, Chair. Liz Adams. So it talks about, I think paragraph 68 is taken slightly out of context because that's talking about, well, it's talking about, yeah, small and medium sites. Okay, so you're looking at C, support the development of windfall sites through their policies and decisions, giving great weights to the benefits of using suitable sites within existing settlements for homes. That's where we're coming from, isn't it? And therefore, D, when it talks about working with developers to encourage the subdivision of large sites where this could help speed up delivery of homes, it is like another suggestion. So we're supporting windfall development where those sites are appropriate. The subdivision of large sites, that is large allocated sites, say for 100 houses, but we might subdivide them so that more developers can work on those large sites at the same time. So I think it's just context. It's reading paragraph 68 and the ABCD points sort of in context. We're looking at C. I think D is talking about a different context.
Okay, thank you. So you're saying that these are separate issues rather than a coherent whole that's being described.
Through you, Chair, I think what I'm saying is a site doesn't have to be large in order to be subdivided. Yes, each site has to be considered on its merits when we're talking about windfall sites.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is that all of the points you wish to make at this time, David?
I think yes. My main concern is that all of these decisions, we need to be applying great weight to recently made neighbourhood plans, and anything that sort of seeks to get in between the structure of a neighbourhood plan, I think needs to be fairly strongly based. I'm a little ambivalent as to the benefits of this, but I accept what the officers are saying. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I shall move on then to my next speaker, and that's Robin Cook.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think the designer of this deserves certainly 10 out of 10 for ingenuity, and we're always encouraged to make best use of space for development. And I think you can say that is definitely the case as far as this is concerned. I don't see any great criticism coming through in anywhere of the reports, etc., about the appearance of what we see in the fact the slide on the screen there. I think what it's replacing looks a lot better. It's no bigger really, but it looks a lot tidier. So I think it's difficult to make any criticism there. And I think the main concerns there are about, if not in any particular order, about the car parking issue and about the construction issue. But I'm a little bit more worried about the amenity for the future residents. And there is some detail in section 16 with the sunlight report and so on. And I think I would disagree with the officer where it's in 1626, the officers consider that the level of daylight will be provided to future occupiers, even on the shortest day of the year, 6 to 8 weeks either side, will be sufficient for habitable purposes. Well, I wouldn't tend to agree with that entirely. I think it's going to be quite overbearing when you're down at that lower level. And when we saw the floor plan, from memory, I don't know whether, I can't remember the slide number, I do apologise, but there was a floor plan quite early on. Yeah, I think was there an earlier one where it showed a sort of, that's it. This is presumably where the patio doors, etc., are. You've got quite a long area away from there, study office without any access to main light that I can see, other than possibly there. So I wouldn't mind that fencing to be lower. I think you said through you, Chairman, Liz, you said that it could be lowered to allow more light in, because I'm worried about the future amenity. And you take a day like today, I don't know where you are, but I know in Wimborne it's pretty black out there now, and we're struggling to bring light into our house without putting lights on. So I think it would be quite depressing in some respects, but it's a clever use of the space. And if we can get over those issues like car parking and where visitors are going to park, etc., because that little bit of lane behind there is quite narrow. We went on the site visit there, I think, at the beginning of this year. And remember, that lane is quite narrow with hedging on one side and the properties on the other. So, excuse me, where the visitors going to park. But otherwise, I'm reasonably happy with it, other than the daylight conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Shane Bartlett, you wanted to come back?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Similar considerations that Councillor Cook was just expressing, but from a slightly different direction. We have set ourselves as being an authority that is going to concentrate on good planning and good design. And I don't disagree that this is, in terms of a design and trying to accommodate a dwelling on this site, is innovative. I think the architects have had a field day with it. I think they've come up with a design that on paper looks great. But I think section 15.0 on page 25 in the report, the officer's report, it starts by saying, in accordance with the council's responsibilities for promoting health and well-being, a reduction of health inequalities across the county, the potential impact of the proposal on general health and well-being has been considered. And the report ends with, in considering this application, regard has been given to the future well-being and health of the local population within the scope of the material planning considerations applicable to this application in the realms of planning legislation. I think that's all well and good, but I'm also of a view that any future resident living in this property, which, let's face it, effectively they're going to be living in a bunker because there is only the bedroom that is above ground, the entire rest of the living space is below ground. And I would have thought that to the average person, that is going to be detrimental to their health and well-being going into the future. I can't imagine that most people would actually willingly expect to spend a significant amount of time in a living space like this. And it may be that if the property comes onto the market, that it would be bought. It would be seen as a way for someone getting onto the housing ladder. But the resident may well come to regret it in later years, living in such conditions. I just don't think it's in terms of architectural design, yeah, fine. But in terms of actually the health and well-being of any future resident, I've got serious concerns about that. I think from that aspect, I think it's poor.
Chairman, if I may, if I could come back through you, I do apologise for interjecting, but I would like just to remind members that we need to stick to the material planning considerations in terms of the health and well-being. The officers have pursued the sunlight criteria that's been submitted, and that has come back to demonstrate that with regards to that living accommodation, that they satisfy the criteria regarding sunlight into those rooms. Whilst it may not be something the members consider ideal in terms of planning and in terms of the planning considerations with regard to health and well-being, it satisfies those tests. And we are very mindful as planning officers that we have to make decisions based on those material planning considerations. And we have advanced this as far as we can within the realms of planning, and that's been deemed to be acceptable in terms of our remit. Thank you.
Can I come back, Madam Chairman? Yeah, I fully appreciate that we have to do it on the merit of the case of material planning conditions. I don't have a problem with that. In terms of those tests, I think they can be questioned, whether those tests are actually robust enough and whether they're sufficiently good enough. In the officer's report, it talks about emitting light into the underground part of this application, reducing the fence height to try and encourage more light. Now, when you're starting to sort of bend and tweak things to try and accommodate what the material planning considerations are in order to make the application fit around the rules, then I think it does become questionable. I think it is really sort of clutching at straws to start talking about reducing fence heights to create more light so that it will actually pass the tests. And that's what I've got a concern about. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on to my next speaker, and that's Mike Dyer.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened to the debate quite carefully, and it seems to me that although many members have got reservations about this, none of them stack up to a reason for refusal. They're all opinions which are relevant, but they're not strong enough to come up with a reason to refuse. And I've noticed that nobody has actually done that throughout the debate. Nobody has made any indication that they're in the process of thinking about a reason for approval or refusal. Now, I've listened to the debate and Councillor Heatley summed it up quite well, in my opinion, and I'm not going to go through everything he said because I totally agree with it. And I think that on balance, this one should be approved. In fact, the only reservation I've really got about it is the comment from Highways about the possibility of selling off the car parking space. So I think if we had a condition that would prevent that, that would be a good thing. Even if that condition wasn't in there, I'd still be minded to approve it. So I'm going to move approval, Chairman.
Okay, I was just making a note of that, so I've got everything. Can I ask, I think, Colin, you popped up on my video feed. Did you wish to make a comment regarding the parking and the subdivision, further subdivision of the plot in the future?
Yes, please, Chair. Yeah, through you. Now, the point I made was that that's as it stands at the moment. At the moment, you've got a house there with parking outside on the frontage on the street, not allocated. Everybody's got that. And it has got a large garden with a parking space in it. And I was saying, as it stands at the moment, that's what they could have separated off. There's no condition protecting that parking space. What they're proposing now, I have in fact put a condition on it to say that parking space must be retained. So that's covering that situation, which should have been done in his historical situation. I don't know when that happened, probably before the Planning Act. Anyway, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I'm content with that. I didn't fully understand it, but I do now. So I'm content to move approval, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mike. I've got several more speakers wanting to come back. I think I'm going to ask, first of all, is there a seconder, please, for the proposal?
Councillor Worth, I was about to
Yes.
come in to do that, to second it, so I'm happy to second this proposal. You're on mute.
You're on mute, Chairman.
Sorry, trying to do too many things at once. John, you said that you're happy to second the proposal to grant. Is there anything you wish to add to support your seconding the proposal?
No, I just I agree with Councillor Dyer's summing up. I think you know, it's there was no material planning reasons to refuse this, so on that basis I'm quite happy to second it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go back now to Alex Brenton.
Thank you, Chair. It's a point of information, really. Looking again at the, I think it's page 9, proposed floor layout plans, which is the downstairs, shall we say, the bunker part of the building. How are they going to excavate the top half of that, the living room area, without destroying the parking space which is outside on the road, which is the neighbours? So how are they actually going to be able to do this? It seems to me, if they have basically got to dig up the neighbour's parking space, dig the hole, then reinstate, this does seriously affect the, you know, the well-being of neighbours in the process, and therefore has to be what's the word, detrimental to the street scene and to the neighbours I don't know, health and well-being, whatever the phrases we use these days. How are they going to have you got a sort of idea of how they're going to do it? Thank you.
Liz, do you want to respond to that, please?
Thank you, Chair. So the parking space is adjoining the existing workshop, and in order to construct it, they're going to have to demolish the existing workshop, excavate the land and build it. And I showed you earlier the picture of the contiguous piling which would go in along here. So the need to go over or to do any works on the neighbouring land is a matter covered by the Party Wall Act. So they would need to enter into an agreement with whoever owns that land. And other than that, it's not a planning consideration. So during construction is involves disruption, it involves traffic movements, it involves activities occurring that would not normally occur on a residential site, but this is for a short period of short duration to enable the development to be constructed, just the same as any other development. So I can't see that, although I fully appreciate that the parking space issue is one that will have to be discussed with the neighbour who owns the land, it's not a matter on which a planning decision would be made. It's not a material consideration in this instance. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think I would add to that is the photograph that Liz put up earlier of the piling and the retaining wall. I think from memory, when I've seen it shown on various programmes, is that the piling goes in first, and then once that's in and set, then they excavate the ground behind it, so that's put in and then it's exposed afterwards. So you don't dig the land away and then put the piling in. You put the piling in and then you expose the piling through the excavation. So that way they are protecting the neighbour's land. But I agree that there would have to be some sort of neighbour negotiation through the construction management, and that's outside of our remit today. Alex, are you happy with the responses?
Sorry, I understand. I'm just baffled as to how this can happen without very, very serious disruption in the whole area. And I know that happens with everything, but there's no runoff area for your JCBs and such like. So I am very concerned. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And my last speaker is Shane Bartlett.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, Councillor Dyer got in before me for a proposal on this. I was going to propose a refusal on the grounds of, and I might need some help from the officers here as to whether it's a significant
Can
reason.
I stop you there?
Yeah.
Because we do have a proposal on the table that has been seconded to grant.
Yeah, I want to speak to it.
I cannot take a counter proposal.
No.
Unless that falls. If
that
falls, then I will come back to you.
Yeah, I just want to speak to a proposal that was on the table.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, so as the proposal is to grant, my concerns and the reason why I wanted to vote against the proposal that's on the table, and I need some guidance from the officers as to whether it is a sufficient material grounds to do that, is that I considered this to be a significantly contrived engineering to facilitate a proposed application for the intended dwelling on a very constrained site. I just needed some guidance from the officers whether I was able to do that. If not, I would need to abstain.
Through you, Chair. Ms Adams.
Yes,
thank you. The issue there is that I haven't identified the actual harm that you've. I'm not sure as yet what the. So you've said it's a. You've noted it's a constrained plot.
Yeah.
But what's the harm that you are concerned about?
Well, as I already said in the debate, in terms of the health and well-being of any future resident of it, and the fact that it is a contrived engineering to facilitate this dwelling on a very constrained site.
I think from an officer's point of view, the fact that it's contrived is only an issue if it results in harm. So I'd say that the harm you've identified would be the impact on the amenity for future users as a result of limited outlook and overbearing impact of that boundary around the subterranean garden, I suppose. Is that so you'd be arguing that it was that the design was didn't provide the high standard of amenity that would be expected. Yeah. I think that would be that's my understanding of your position.
Yeah.
So that is a position that you could choose to hold. I mean, officers have obviously considered the issue of amenity, and although it is tight, and although it is that boundary screening is sort of suboptimal, you wouldn't really want it that high in an ideal circumstance. Officers consider that overall that wouldn't be sufficiently harmful to warrant refusal, but that's an officer opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's why we get these balanced decisions coming into committee, because they are tricky. So we have a proposal to grant, and I just want to double check. So we were talking about condition about not being able to subdivide the plot any further, so that the parking is retained, and we've had that confirmed that is already in the existing proposed conditions. So it's been proposed by Mike Dyer and seconded by John Worth. I will now go through the roll call and take the vote. So Shane Bartlett.
I've listened to the officer's report and I've listened to the debate in full and understand the application proposal before us, and I vote against.
Okay. Alex Brenton.
Thank you. I have listened all the way through this, and I understand the site and I understand the conditions, but I still vote against.
Okay, Robin Cook.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've listened to the presentation and the full debate, and I support grant.
Okay, thank you. Mike Dyer.
I've been present throughout, listened to the debate and all the presentations, and I vote to approve grant.
Okay, thank you. Where are we? Barry Gorringe.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened to the presentation, I've listened to the debate, and I going for approval and grant.
Okay. Brian Heatley.
I've been present throughout and listened to everything, and I want to approve the application.
Okay, thank you. David Morgan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've listened to the debate. I've been here all the time, and I vote for approval.
Okay, thank you. David Took.
I've listened with interest to the debate. I've been here all the time. I'm not entirely happy with it. I don't want to abstain because that's non-thing. So I think reluctantly I'm going to vote in favour of granting.
Okay, thank you. And finally, John Worth.
I've listened to the debate and the officer's report and fully participated, and I vote for a grant.
Okay, thank you. So, David Northover, can you just confirm the outcome of the vote, please?
As Chairman, the outcome is 7-4, 2 against.
Okay. In that case, the application is granted. Thank you all very much for a very interesting and detailed debate on that application. Okay, I'm going to move on now to our next application, and that is agenda item 5B. Change stroke added use of family centre into residential facility and office space at Hazelwood County First School, Coal Hill, and that's pages 45 to 56 on your agenda. And taking us through that one is Katie Lomax. Morning, Katie.
Hello, good morning. Right. Hopefully you can see my presentation.
My mouse
Yes,
is playing
thank
up.
you.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Right, good morning. My name is Katie Lomax and I am the planning officer for this application 319-0862. It's for the change of use of the existing redundant family centre into a mixed use of C3 and D1, a children's residential care facility and office space. It's brought to you to committee this morning because it's an application made by Dorset Council. There have been no objections to the proposal and the parish council support the application. So here we have the site in context. It's located between Coal Hill, which is to the west of Wimborne, between the main towns of Wimborne and Ferndown. The site is to the northwest of Camphor Bottom Roundabout. The access is via Cutler's Place, which is a residential road just off Middle Hill Road, which runs from Camphor Bottom all the way into Coal Hill. And the site itself is located immediately adjacent to Hazelwood First School. Immediately to the north of the site is a dwelling here at number 88 Middle Hill Road, and number 8 Cutler's Place lies just here to the east, with Hazelwood First School to the south. The vehicular access runs through the school gates and the car park. The site is occupied by a detached bungalow which is elevated above the school due to changes in land levels. There's an enclosed area of garden to the east and 4 car parking spaces to the west. Here we have the site photos. View A is from the turning area looking over the car parking across the northwest side elevation and towards the bungalow of number 88 Middle Hill Road. View B runs from the corner of the site looking down the boundary with number 88. And view C is from the access road looking up towards the car parking spaces in the western corner of the site. View D is the opposing view. It's taken from the access looking down into the school car park. View E is off the site boundary to the northwest. View F is from the school car park looking at the access track which leads up towards the bungalow. And view G is the front elevation and side elevation of the bungalow itself. Here we have the existing floor plans which show the current layout of the bungalow with 4 offices just here alongside the existing lounge, kitchen and bathroom facilities. And here we have the proposed plan. So the proposals for the conversion of 2 of the offices into separate bedrooms and for a flexible office with staff sleeping arrangement for occasional use. The existing kitchen, lounge and bathroom facilities are retained. No external changes are proposed at all. The application's been submitted by Dorset Council as a part of the Council's plan to improve the facilities for residential care within the county and will be used to provide long-term residential care for looked after children who are subject to care plans. The period of residence could vary from several months to several years depending on individual care plans. The office space here is retained so that the staff on shift have appropriate facilities, and it also provides the option to use the bungalow as an outreach centre in the future, should the residential use no longer be required. So the main considerations, as outlined in the report, include the principle of development. As the site is located within the urban area of Coal Hill, the proposed change of use involving the introduction of a C3 use alongside and retaining the existing D1 use is considered acceptable in principle, subject to other policies and considerations. The impact on the character of the area has also been considered. The character of the area adjacent to the school, as shown in this photograph, is exclusively residential. The bungalow itself was originally built as a caretaker's dwelling and is of a residential appearance. No alterations externally or changes are required, and so the proposed change of use is not expected to have significant impact on the character of the area. The next consideration is neighbouring amenity. As previously mentioned, the site is located in a residential area. The nearest neighbour is number 88 Middle Hill Road, which is approximately 10.5 metres to the north, with the intervening boundary fence, as shown in the photo. The distance between the properties remains the same. There's no change in the relationship of the bungalow to its neighbours, and the separation distance is considered appropriate and is not unusual in the context of the area. The change of use of 2 of the offices into bedrooms will facilitate the occupation of the building by 1 child and 2, occasionally 3 members of staff at any one time. The staff here work in shifts from 11 AM until 11:30 AM the following day. This means that there'll be a small number of vehicle movements which will take place at this time, which is not considered to be unsociable or more harmful to amenity than the previous use as a family centre, where there could have been a much larger number of visitors coming and going throughout the day. The potential occupation of the building and use of its garden by 4 people is really no different than the ordinary residential occupation of a family dwelling in this residential area, and is considered compatible with the surrounding land uses, which are school and residential. It's not anticipated that the change of use based on the existing physical relationship will result in demonstrable harm to the neighbours in terms of noise or disturbance. The bungalow would only be used as an outreach centre in the future should residential occupation no longer be required. It's envisaged that this would also involve 2 to 3 members of the existing team working here, with occasional visits from social workers and parents, which would occur in normal office hours. This would limit any disturbance to office hours only and is not considered to result in a substantial change in the impact on amenity from the previous use or the proposed residential use. The impact on neighbouring amenity as a result of the change of use is therefore minimal and would not warrant the refusal of this application. It's considered to accord with the policies of the core strategy. The rear of the site backs onto an area of protected trees, and the access also runs through a much larger area TPO. Because there's no physical change that is proposed, the tree officers considered the proposal and it'll have no harmful impacts on any of the nearby protected trees. It's therefore considered acceptable in this regard. The site's also located between 400 metres and 5k of a protected heathland and proposes a net increase in 1 residential unit. The council satisfied that the mitigation required, as set out in the Dorset Heathlands SPD, will be secured so that the development will not result in harm to the integrity of protected habitat sites, and the proposal therefore accords with policy ME2 of the core strategy. The final consideration is the impact on highways safety and car parking. The site has 4 existing car parking spaces, including 1 disabled space, and no changes to this are proposed. The maximum residential occupation is proposed to be 1 child and at times 3 members of staff. The on-site car parking is adequate for these purposes and exceeds the council guidelines for a 3-bedroom house. Any additional staff or visitors would be able to park in the residential roads in the local vicinity. And should the residential use no longer be required, the D1 use would have a similar impact on parking as the existing use, and the council's highways officer has considered that they also would consider the current provision acceptable for the proposed D1 use. So with sufficient car parking and no highway safety considerations, the proposal is also acceptable in this regard. So in summary, the principle of the development is acceptable in the urban location. The impact on the neighbouring amenity is also considered acceptable. The impact on the street scene is acceptable as there's no material change. There's no harmful impact on the protected trees, and there is considered to be sufficient car parking to serve the proposed change of use. The proposal is found to accord with the relevant local and national planning policies, and the recommendation is therefore to grant, subject to conditions as detailed in the officer's report, which is on pages 45 and to 54 of today's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katie. I'm now going to move on to public representation. Chelsea College, do we have any representations from the public?
We've not received any representations for this one, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much. I understand that one of the local members who is not on the committee is in attendance to this meeting, and that's Janet Dover. Janet, would you like to speak to committee on this one?
Seemingly, Councillor Dover, although she had accepted my invitation to this meeting, she seemingly has chosen not to wish to speak on this item. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. I was aware that she was in the meeting, so I wanted to give her the opportunity. Okay, I'm now going to move then straight on to the member debate. And my first speaker will be Robin Cook.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I think there's a lot of support for this. It's badly needed, and I'm just going to move acceptance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. David Took, you're the next speaker. Do you wish? The floor is yours.
I simply want to second Robin's proposal. I think this is an excellent idea and fully support it.
Thank you. Shane, you're my next speaker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I just wanted to say that obviously this is a great opportunity for residential and permanent childcare for looked after children within the county. There is a shortage of this type of facility within the county. It has virtually no impact on the local community, and I fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have no further speakers, so I'm going to put it straight to the vote. It has been proposed and duly seconded for grant. I will now go through the roll call. Shane Bartlett.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've listened to the officer's report and I've listened to the debate and understood the application proposal before us, and I vote to approve.
Thank you. Alex Brenton.
Thank you, Chairman. I have listened to the presentation and I am fully in favour of this application.
Thank you. Robin Cook.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've listened to the debate and the presentation, everything connected with it, and I support approval.
Thank you. Mike Dyer.
Where are you, Mike?
Sorry, say it again. Present throughout, heard the presentation, vote for approval.
Thank you. Barry Gorringe.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened to the presentation and the debate, and I fully approve this application. And let's go for grant.
Thank you. Brian Heatley.
I've been present and listening throughout, and I'm fully in favour.
Thank you. David Morgan.
I've listened to the presentation and I vote approval.
Thank you. David Took.
I've listened to the entire presentation, been through all the paperwork. I think it's an excellent idea and I vote for approval.
Thank you. And last but not least, John Worth.
Yes, I've listened to the presentation and the report, and I'm happy to support this.
That's lovely. Thank you. I will ask David Northover for confirmation, but to me that sounds like unanimous.
Chairman, unanimous for the application.
That's fantastic. So the application is granted. I will say, just finally, in a previous incarnation, I chaired the Corporate Parenting Board and did visit this site. And I know that this is part of the move to reduce our out-of-county expenditure. So I'm really pleased that members have supported it. As you can see, I did not take part in the vote on that. Okay, so item 5C has been deferred. So moving on to item 6, and that is urgent items. Members will be pleased to know that there are none this time. We also do not have at this stage any appeal outcomes to be reported to committee, but obviously we will do so again in the future when that becomes apparent. So at 11:27, I say thank you to everybody that's taken part this morning, and despite a few minor background technical wobbles, I think we've managed to get through okay this time. So thank you all very much, and we'll see you in the new year. Thank you. Meeting is closed.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.